Why did have all these things happen to you?
I don't know. I looked up at the heavens and asked that.
As a black man in America, at that time, you know, black America's watching him. You know, he's one of their heroes because he made it.
If you had to outline your identity, where would you start and where would it go?
That's Sammy Davis Jr. Oh, that's the black guy that turned Jewish. Or that's the guy with the one eye.
Sammy Davis Jr. was undeniably one of the most talented and beloved male entertainers in Hollywood during the 1950s.
Now that's black power.
Despite his immense talent, he faced significant backlash from various communities. As a Republican, he was often criticized by the black community, and his relationships with white women drew criticism from Hollywood and beyond.
I was scared. I was petrified. They didn't like me because I was black. They didn't like me because I was a black Jew. And they didn't like a black Jew who was also at that time married to a white lady.
Many felt that his choices alienated him from both groups, leading to accusations of betrayal. In the mid-1960s, Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most famous individuals in the world, ranking just behind Martin Luther King Jr. and Muhammad Ali. Davis was widely accepted in white households across the US, where he was seen as a, quote, palatable and often upbeat presence for white audiences. However, remembering him solely as the only black member of the Rat Pack and a friend of fellow crooners Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin overlooks the intricate and nuanced relationship Davis had with black politics during the civil rights and black power movements. With his diminutive frame, Sammy Davis Jr. emanated enough star power to rival the Hubble telescope. Imagine starring in a Broadway musical performing 10 songs including 4 solos. Now add a meticulously choreographed fight scene for the finale. Then consider doing 8 shows a week including 2 on Wednesdays and Saturdays, recording albums, doing charity benefits, and smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. But wait, there's more. Every night into the early hours, you're also collaborating with biographers on your memoirs. This was the life of Sammy Davis Jr. starting in the spring of 1964 when he took on the lead in a musical adaptation of Clifford Odets' Depression-era drama Golden Boy. This production was crafted specifically to showcase Davis's talents by the acclaimed Broadway songwriting team of Charles Strauss and Lee Adams' Bye Bye Birdie. And was tailored by Odets to capture the racially charged boxing era of Sugar Ray Robinson and Cassius Clay. Golden Boy was a rare topical show on Broadway during the 1960s, a decade more inclined towards genteel entertainment. The lead character, Joe Wellington, renamed from Odets' original Italian hero Joe Bonaparte, required a stage personality of immense talent, courage, and endurance, qualities that Sammy Davis Jr. embodied perfectly. In his early showbiz years, Sammy forged the prodigious tools of his trade. Quote, in those days, in show business, speaking medically, the job was not to be a specialist, but a general practitioner. You had to do a little bit of everything. Know how to say a line, sing a song, tap a dance, do a joke, he later observed. Just as he was composed of a cornucopia of talents, Sammy was many, many people and with just as many contradictions.
You make me very
Good man.
You make me very proud.
In a July 1966 issue of that inestimable chronicle of American culture, Mad Magazine, Sammy's existential dilemma was brilliantly crystallized in a spoof of ethnic stereotyping called stereotypecasting by the numbers. In it, the writer and artist attempted a kind of numerical taxonomy. When it came to the formerly accepted and now looked back upon with disgust term of identification, the magazine averred that 1 was token integration, 2 was a championship bout, 3 was an emerging African nation, and 4 was, quote, Sammy Davis Jr. This was his paradox. He was at once as talented as 4 men put together, and he had to work as hard as 4 white men to achieve what he achieved in post-war America. Sammy Davis's personality was so complex he taxed the taxonomy. The trajectory of Sammy Davis Jr.'s many lives spanned numerous flashpoints in American history. Davis began his career in vaudeville, dancing with his father and uncle as part of the Will Maston Trio on the Chitlin Circuit. He essentially gave up schooling to support his family during the Depression. During World War II, he endured bullying and prejudice while serving in one of the first integrated units in basic training.
8 guys painted him white and painted very derogatory things all over his body and made him drink urine from a beer bottle, etc. Just just rough stuff.
As a black entertainer in the late 40s and 50s, he faced numerous boycotts and slurs, even at the nation's most sophisticated clubs.
Black acts couldn't even come in the front door of a hotel. Black acts working in Vegas couldn't stay in the hotel. And this was Lena and Harry Belafonte and Nat Cole, because there was a very hard color line.
Davis played a crucial role in the rise of Las Vegas as a premier entertainment destination. As a member of the Rat Pack, he embodied an imperfect allegory of an integrated America. Despite advocating for and supporting John F. Kennedy's candidacy, Davis was quickly ostracized from Camelot's Entertainment Roundtable when his marriage to white actress Mae Britt proved too incendiary for the Southern Democrats Kennedy was trying to appease.
It was a moment that, again, getting hate mail and calls and, black leaders, saying, "What are you doing?"
After Martin Luther King visited him backstage at Golden Boy, Sammy Davis Jr. became an activist during the civil rights movement, though he was initially extremely reluctant to go south of the Mason-Dixon line. By the time of King's assassination, Davis had transformed into an impassioned advocate for the cause, helping to raise more money for civil rights than any other celebrity, black or white. However, when he befriended Richard Nixon at the beginning of Nixon's 1972 election campaign, it created a significant rift between Davis and the black fan base that had supported and idolized him for decades. Predictably, for such a high roller, he was later swept up into the excesses of the 1970s, including and dissolution. It wasn't until the mid-80s that he managed to straighten himself out, but a major career comeback was denied to him when he contracted throat cancer and died in 1990.
They could give him a good chance to make it if they removed the voice box, if they performed an operation on him. And Sammy said if he couldn't sing, he didn't want to live.
Ironically, although Sammy Davis Jr. was the youngest member of the Rat Pack, nearly all the other members outlived him. Davis was a veritable human Venn diagram, intersecting with many of the key figures in 20th century American history and culture, often serving as a bridge between vastly different personalities. He spanned the eras of Bill Robinson and Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra and James Brown, Ethel Waters and Kim Novak, Eddie Cantor and Harry Belafonte, Clifford Odets and Jerry Lewis, Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis. His life was a study in both triumph and tragedy. Quote, "You are like two characters in the same play," Sinatra supposedly told him. "Your talent is the hero and your excess is the villain." Sammy was an unparalleled talent, the showbiz equivalent of a running back who could routinely charge downfield to gain 90 or even 100 yards per play. However, society kept moving the goalposts, now 120 yards, now 140, and so on. But his dedication and support for the Nixon Republican caused stir among his admirers. Sammy Davis Jr. embraced former President Richard Nixon at a campaign rally allegedly because Nixon promised to alleviate the singer's tax burden. Clark Peters, known for his role as Lester Freeman in HBO's The Wire, has been exploring Davis's past for an upcoming musical he's directing called Sammy at the Lyric Hammersmith Theatre in London. During a youth rally performance in Miami shortly after Nixon was re-elected as the Republican presidential candidate in 1972, Davis introduced the president and hugged him from behind, a moment that has since sparked much discussion and controversy.
Nixon said something nice about him, and Sammy was standing behind him, and he just walked up to him and for a second put his arms around him. And
the motivation behind Davis Jr.'s embrace has long been a source of mystery and an additional reason for black Americans to turn against him. Quote, "From what I hear, and I'm still trying to get to the bottom of it, he owed a lot of money in back taxes that Nixon was supposed to have found a way to alleviate. I would hug him too, you know what I am saying?" Peters told The Times. Davis was already a controversial figure who had irked the community by converting to Judaism, having relationships mainly with white women and being suspected of associating with mobsters. Peters added that he hoped to use the play to put Davis Jr.'s actions in context and allow the audience to draw their own conclusions. Davis's support of Nixon in the 1970s enraged many who saw the Republican as rolling back the progress implemented by his predecessor Lyndon B. Johnson. According to Martin Luther King Jr. Institute at Stanford University, quote, "Nixon reversed some of the social and economic welfare policies of predecessor Lyndon B. Johnson, vetoing new health, education, and welfare legislation. Seeking Southern support for the Republican Party, Nixon supported anti-busing legislation and favored law and order policies that were widely seen as directed against black militancy." Unknown at the time, Nixon also regularly used racist epithets in private conversation, adding another layer to the complexity of Davis's association with him. Here's a direct quote quote from Nixon: "We're going to place more of these little N-word B-words on the welfare rolls at $2,400 a family," Nixon once said about what he saw as lax work requirements. Peters said he is trying to redeem Davis from being cast out as an Uncle Tom or just a black Jew for his relationship with the president. Peters, the acclaimed actor and director who starred as Albert Big Chief Lambro in Treem, compared Davis and Nixon to the current presidential love affair between Donald Trump and rapper Kanye West. Davis and Nixon first crossed paths when the former was invited to the White House on July 1st, 1971 to accept a role on the National Advisory Council on Economic Opportunity. Nixon later sent the singer to Vietnam to perform for US troops and invited him to a White House reception in '73.
They didn't have too many fans within the black community. So Nixon had reached, there's a story behind this too. Nixon had reached out to Sammy. They had met in the late 50s.
According to timelines, Davis saw the relationship with Nixon as an opportunity to advocate for issues faced by black Americans. "When my wife, Alto Vice, and I were invited to the White House after the November elections, I repeated my recommendations," he told Ebony. According to a book written by Sammy's daughter Tracy Davis in 2016, his greatest humiliation was at the hands of President John Kennedy, who refused to let him perform at his inauguration because Sammy had married a white woman. Swedish actress May Britt.
You know, it's absolutely wonderful, because the wonderful thing about Alfred Hitchcock is,
in preparation for directing the musical, which also involves Davis's longtime British friend and songwriter Leslie Bricusse, and will star Giles Terera, the Olivier-winning actor from Hamilton, in the lead role, Peters has been taking advantage of his access to the surviving legends of the era. When Davis rode high with Frank Sinatra and other members of the Rat Pack such as Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier. At this age and at my point in my career, there are enough people that I can go to glean some answers from and ask questions. Peters, who wrote and directed the acclaimed Five Guys Named Mo and became globally renowned after his performances in the American TV series The Wire, said, "But people find out a black person working with a white politician and think it's absurd, and also in the days when racism was at its peak." One person wrote, quote, "For me, in the picture of Sammy Davis Jr. overlooking Nixon signing a bill made more of a statement, and why it was a mistake of those that attacked him over a hug. They don't get it." Nixon introduced MLK to Eisenhower for Brown versus Board of Education. But black community is not the only one who thought bad of him. He also became a non-favorite of racist whites as well. In 1957, Sammy Davis Jr. was a rising star. He had just completed an acclaimed performance in Mr. Wonderful on Broadway and had a popular nightclub act with his father and uncle called the Will Maston Trio.
My uncle, my Danny.
It was a strong comeback from a car accident 3 years earlier when a pipe went through Davis's eye, permanently blinding him.
He would have been dead because the engine was sitting in the front seat of his car.
A cone coming out of the center of the steering wheel, and his eye hit it.
For the rest of his life, he would wear a glass eye. However, the accident did nothing to curtail Davis's charisma and appeal. Hollywood starlet Kim Novak certainly noticed him. She was about to film Hitchcock's Vertigo when she saw Davis perform in a Chicago nightclub. Though they didn't speak much at the time, Davis wanted to get to know the actress. His friends Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh obliged by inviting both of them to a party at their house. Soon afterward, there was a blind item in a gossip column: which top female movie star KN is seriously dating which big-name entertainer SD. This bit of idle gossip was far from harmless. An affair between Novak and Davis had the potential to destroy both of their careers. In 1957, interracial marriage was illegal in half the states, and most Americans were against it. A Gallup poll from 1958 showed that only 4% of Americans approved of interracial marriage. On top of that, the United States Supreme Court had only recently ordered the desegregation of public schools, and the showdown in Little Rock, Arkansas over the integration of the city's Central High School would occur the following year. The national atmosphere was fraught with racial tension. As a black man, Davis had been stopped from dating white women before, but this time was different. Novak was a movie star. That year, newspapers were calling her the hottest female draw at the box office thanks to films like The Man with the Golden Arm and Pal Joey. Columbia Pictures was grooming her to replace Rita Hayworth, whom studio head Harry Cohn disliked. As the latest Hollywood goddess, Novak was potentially worth millions. When he saw the gossip item, Davis called Novak to apologize for putting her in an awkward position with the studio. According to his autobiography Sammy, Novak replied, "The studio doesn't own me," and invited him over for spaghetti and meatballs. Soon after, they were dating. Their affair continued for most of 1957. Davis and Novak were aware of the risks they were taking, but that, it seems, made the relationship more exciting. She hadn't thought about me any more than I had thought about her until it was forbidden, Davis wrote in his autobiography. Then we became conspirators, drawn together by the single thing we had in common: defiance. Arthur Silber, a close friend and companion of Davis, often chauffeured the couple to a rented beach house in Malibu. They went to great lengths to hide their relationship. Davis would sometimes lie on the floor of the car under a blanket to avoid being seen with him. It was like we were in the FBI or something, Silber says in an interview. I would drop him off in front of her house in Beverly Hills and we would set up a time or a day for me to pick him up. Davis also had a private phone line installed at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, where he worked so he could talk to Novak without the hotel switchboard listening in. In December, Novak went home to Chicago for the holidays while Davis stayed in Las Vegas. He missed Novak so much that he found a replacement for his act and flew overnight to see her and meet her parents. Irv Kupchanet of the Chicago Sun-Times heard about the visit and mentioned it in his column. Gossip heated up. There was a rumor that Davis and Novak had taken out a marriage license. Quote, Kim Novak is about to become engaged to Sammy Davis Jr. in Hollywood as Aghast, reported the London Daily Mirror. When Cohn found out, he became enraged that his star, who he regarded as property he's invested in, was dating a black man. The next morning, while flying to Los Angeles, he had the first of several heart attacks that would soon kill him. By all accounts, Cohn was a ruthless studio chief who admired Benito Mussolini and had ties to the Chicago mob. He even wore matching ruby friendship rings with gangster Johnny Rosselli. There are various accounts of what happened next, but what's clear is that Cohn took out a mob hit on Davis. Gangster Mickey Cohn found Davis's father and passed on the street. Silber was there when Davis received the phone call. Quote, they said they would break both of his legs, put out his other eye, and bury him in a hole if he didn't marry a black woman right away, says Silber. He was scared as hell, same as I was. Novak, who has consistently asserted that her relationship with Davis was never anything other than friendship, has also said that the studio ordered her to stop seeing him. They also placed guards around her house. And I thought, this is ridiculous, I don't want to live like this, she told Larry King in 2004. I couldn't see what was wrong. Do you know what was so terrible? For his part, Davis went to his friend gangster Sam Giancana for protection. Giancana told him that he could protect Davis in Las Vegas and Chicago, but he had no reach in Hollywood. The threat loomed over him. The wedding was the only solution. Soon after, in January '58, Silber was sitting on the bed in the Sands Hotel polishing a cowboy boot when he noticed Davis sitting on the other bed paging through an address book. I said, what the F are you doing, says Silber, and he said, I'm looking for someone to marry. The woman he chose was Lorraine White, a black singer who worked across the street at the Silver Slipper. She and Davis had gone out a few times in the past. Now Davis offered her a lump sum between $10,000 and $25,000 to marry him and act as his wife. She agreed. In pictures of their Las Vegas wedding, White and Davis drink out of an oversized martini glass beside a tiered cake with the word happiness written on it. But Silber, who drove the couple to their wedding suite, recalls that Davis drank heavily all evening and became so distraught in the car that he tried to strangle White. Silber restrained Davis and carried him to his room. Quote, he was so hurt, Silber says. His quote to me as he ripped my coat apart at the shoulder was, why won't they let me live my life? Silber remembers that Davis was particularly distraught that night at the hotel. Quote, I walked back into the bedroom just as he was putting a gun to his head, says Silber. I jumped on him and I got the gun away from him. Then I sat on him with my knees on his shoulders until he passed out. By September, newspapers were reporting that White and Davis were getting divorced. One day, a couple of years later, Sammy and Silber were having lunch at 20th Century Fox when a woman walked in. She was tall and lovely with shiny blonde hair and a husky voice. Davis promptly introduced himself. Her name was Mai Britt, a 26-year-old Swedish actress who was filming a remake of The Blue Angel. She and Davis started seeing each other. Soon he proposed marriage and she accepted. An outsider to American racial politics, Britt didn't see why race should keep her away from the person she loved. On June 6, 1960, while in England, Davis announced their engagement to the press. The public went mad, Bert Boyar, a close friend who co-wrote Davis's autobiography, says in an interview. When they got engaged, all hell broke loose. The studio immediately canceled Britt's contract. They assumed that she was no use in the box office married to a black man. Davis received so many death threats that he hired 24-hour armed guards. He worried his wife would be attacked if they were seen together, so they rarely went out. When they did, Davis carried a gun or a cane with a knife concealed in the tip. Davis wasn't the first celebrity in an interracial marriage. Singer Harry Belafonte married a white woman in 1957, and in 1912, boxer Joe Jackson was jailed for dating a white woman. But no other prominent interracial marriage received as much publicity as Davis and Britt. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled in Loving v. Virginia that it was unconstitutional to ban interracial marriage. The culture shifted quickly alongside the legal changes that followed, and successful movies featuring interracial romance like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Davis and Britt divorced in 1968. The marriage lasted 8 years and resulted in 3 children. According to Davis's biographer Gary Fishgall, Davis and Novak met again at a ball after the 1979 Oscars. They danced together. Afterwards, Davis was amazed. No one had taken a picture of the two of them. No one even cared. Once, when Britt and Davis were first married, Boyar and his wife were sharing a hotel suite with them in Miami. Martin Luther King Jr. came to visit Davis in the hotel, and Boyar said, "Martin, where are we racially?" Davis interjected and said, "I'll tell you where I am. I'm in the best suite in this hotel, but I can't walk down the street with my wife." King replied with the words of a slave preacher whom he would later quote in a speech to the New York Civil War Centennial Commission in 1962. He said, "We ain't what we ought to be. We ain't what we want to be. We ain't what we gonna be, but thank God we ain't what we was." In Davis's own lifetime, a few of his dreams came true. Some came true after his death. Many have not yet come to pass. But the important thing to embrace about Sammy Davis Jr. is not just that he could, but more inspirationally, that he did.